So Ukraine today is executing a new strategy. It's one that we're all watching and we're all enjoying to watch, which is that Ukraine is striking deep inside of Russia. Drone strikes are now almost a daily occurrence. And this goes beyond just what we saw the first day of June when Operation Spiderweb kicked off. This is larger. This is going to be a continued effort, it looks like, for months to come. And this effort is to deny Russia's ability to wage war in Ukraine. This is not just a new tactic, it's an entire new strategy. And the reason is very simple. Ukraine is a much smaller country than Russia. In Russia, there's about 146 million people. In Ukraine, in the free territory, there's only about 22 million. So, as General Ben Hodges said during my recent conversation with him for the Kyiv Post, it's simply a math problem. The math doesn't work out to have a war of attrition. That's what Russia would like to have. Russia historically has been able to win wars because it is the bigger country. It is bigger than the other countries in Europe. So when it engages in a war, it knows that, yes, it might have to send in the meat assaults, men who just go into the machine gun fire, but overall, it can exhaust the opponent because it has so many more men than its opponents have. However, that strategy, the only way to stop it is to not agree to play that game, to not agree to engage in attritional war. And that's what Ukraine's doing, very wisely. Ukraine, unfortunately, the top news stories usually say that Ukraine is losing territory, but it totally ignores that Ukraine has a different strategy, and that strategy is not to maintain every centimeter. That'll come later. Ukraine will regain its territory, but that'll happen after it defeats Russia. And there's no way to defeat Russia in an attritional war. So what Ukraine is doing instead is, very wisely, given its limited number of soldiers, ceding land to Russia, ceding to them swamps or empty farmland or abandoned villages. And it's not land that Ukraine immediately needs. They're not people living there. It's not like these people go under occupation. It's abandoned territory. So preserving the lives of Ukrainian soldiers has a far higher value. It is far more necessary, just as a calculus for Ukraine. It doesn't have soldiers just throw around like the Russians do. So Ukraine is shaking it up. Ukraine is not only using things like the drones or ATACMS to strike Russian positions on the front, which it does very effectively, hence why it's able to prevent a lot of Russian assaults. Whenever it sees the Russians starting to muster, to gather around, to prepare for assault, it can strike those positions. But it's more than that. It's that Ukraine needs more than just a tactic for the battlefield. It needs a paradigm shift. And that paradigm shift is represented in attacking the sources of Russia's war against Ukraine. So Ukraine currently is attacking within Russia. It's attacking, as we saw, military bases. It's attacking fighter jets. It's attacking bombers. But it's also attacking the factories, the military-industrial complex. It's attacking the very facilities that make Russia's war on Ukraine possible. This is denying Russia the ability to engage in the type of war that it wants. It's denying Russia the ability to engage in attritional war. Because simply enough, if you don't have the weapons, you don't have the tools you need, things become a lot harder. Now, a lot of people say, but look, Russia today is producing all of its own Shahed drones. Not exactly. It is currently, yes, able to assemble them all, but it still imports a lot of the parts. It is not self-sufficient. It was dependent heavily, actually, on Iran. And as we saw, Iran's got its own problems right now. Iran had actually asked Russia for help, had asked for weapons, had asked for more air defense. And the Russians aren't in a position to be helped with air defense at the moment because every day we see the Ukrainian drones dominate the airspace of Russia. And Russian authorities very clearly are lost. They're confused. They don't know what to do. Because the reality is, there is no easy solution. There's no easy fix for this. And that's why we know Ukraine is on the right page. They're doing the right thing. Because when they're destroying these factories that produce a very specific part or a very specific chemical, there's a good chance that is the only factory in all of Russia that produces that part or that chemical that's used in making explosives or is used to make drones. So Ukraine is denying Russia's ability to engage in war. Yes, the Russians are attacking Ukraine every single day as well. But now we see a shift. The Russians have had to change their priorities. They have to put more resources into protecting Russian territory, which means less resources are used in attacking Ukraine. But there's another chapter of this, another part that's fascinating. We can see within Russia the effects of these ongoing drone strikes. So the population as a whole is, not surprisingly, shocked, surprised. I can't believe this is happening. Just think yourself, what would be the reaction of your own population in your own town if tomorrow drones started coming down on various facilities there, hitting factories, hitting storage facilities, blowing up transport? I think it'd be fair to say that people would become quite panicked quickly. And the Russians are no different. Now, what's interesting about the attacks that they're currently carrying out, though, just in the past week, is that they have routinely closed down Russian airspace. They've closed down Russian airspace in Moscow, in St. Petersburg, in a lot of the major cities. Russian authorities don't know what to do. They see that the population are sharing these photos, these videos, showing that the Russian authorities do not maintain control of their own airspace. These videos showing people panicking in the airports, these videos of thousands of people sleeping on the floors of major airports, people across Russia can't believe it. How is it possible that Sheremetyevo, the largest airport in Russia, in Moscow, has people stuck there for hours or days? And what do the airlines do? They don't know when it's going to stop. The Ukrainians could just keep sending drone after drone after drone and keeping the airspace closed. But for the government of Russia, there's another problem. There's actually a couple other problems. First is to govern Russia, a country of 11 time zones. If you can't catch a flight, it's a long way to walk. But there's another side. This is destroying the narrative upon which the Vladimir Putin regime is built. The regime is built on the premise that perhaps Putin is not democratic, but he provides security. Putin provides security and stability. But it's very hard to argue that he's providing security and stability when people see that not only has Ukraine been able to penetrate the airspace of Russia routinely without being stopped, but that Russia, despite 3.5 years of war, does not have air superiority in Ukraine and cannot protect the airspace anymore within Russia. That's bad. That means that the social contract is being broken. And that can lead to very disgruntled people. And that's why we see that the Russian authorities are turning off things like Telegram and WhatsApp and trying to cut off the internet across huge swaths of Russia, across actually 69 regions of Russia just yesterday. But going ahead, there's another aspect of this. It's not just the scared travelers. And keep in mind, the scared travelers have something in common. Very few people in Russia travel by air, and it's just because it's expensive. Russians as a whole don't have a lot of liquidity. They don't make a lot of money. So taking a flight is truly something uncommon. It's typically going to be the upper class. To try to illustrate a point, only about 29% of Russians have foreign passports. Now, in Moscow and St. Petersburg, it's a little bit over 50%. But from which class are those people that have the foreign passports? Or for those who are catching any flight for that matter? They're going to be from the middle, upper, or the upper classes. And those people are the ones that control the future of the country. They're the ones that work in positions of decision making, where they decide if the government will expend more money, if their industry or their company will expend more money on programs or if they'll cut it back. They're the ones who work at things like insurance. And let's imagine you work at an insurance company and you look out the window and you see that there's Ukrainian drones day after day. Or you go to the airport and you're forced to sleep on the floor all night and your flight just eventually cancels. Would you say that as an actuary, the probability of drone attacks is increasing or decreasing? It's sort of hard to make the metrics for it, but just your gut instinct would tell you, perhaps we should be charging more because it seems there's a better chance that drones are going to get through and start destroying things. And since they do charge more, everything gets more expensive. And that's bad for the government and bad for the people of Russia. But there's a group of the population which the Putin regime cares far more about than the common people. It's very clear that Putin does not care at all about the people of Russia. That group are the upper elites. And unlike most things that happen, which they're able to skate out of due to the fact that they have such wealth, they have such power, they're able to not face the consequences of sanctions like normal people. The thing about drone strikes is it doesn't help how wealthy you are. If you're on your private jet in Moscow, or if you're on the cheapest airline there is, you are in exactly the same situation. When drones are flying overhead, the planes don't fly. So you're also being inconvenienced by this. And why that's important is not just because it's inconvenience, but because it sends a signal. Vladimir Putin helped many of these people become phenomenally wealthy by pillaging Russia for the past 25 years. But they realize now that he's creating a problem for them. Not only are they not getting richer, he's destabilizing the whole country. And if we look back at Russian history and the history of dictatorships as a whole, we realize there's something in common. When you become a threat to the mafia empire, they usually don't treat you very well. They usually get rid of you. And when you are perceived as being weak, it's exactly then that your opponents will gang up together to get rid of you. So Vladimir Putin is frankly skating on thin ice. Anything can happen. Who can guarantee the Putin regime's security today if it's got more and more people who are disenfranchised, who feels it has failed them? It has a military that's demoralized, that's being beaten. It has an intelligence service which is just fully corrupt. It doesn't have the ability to stop what Ukraine is trying to do inside of Russia, which is its primary job, to protect Russia. It's riddled with corruption. All the different mechanisms that it was supposed to have failed. For instance, in Kursk, Russia, the Minister of Transport, who yesterday was fired by Putin, who then a couple hours later was announced that he'd actually died the day before by a gunshot, undoubtedly he was killed. But why? Well, Reuters reports that he was being investigated for embezzling $246 million when he was the governor of Kursk, Russia. That money was meant to defend Kursk, Russia from a potential Ukrainian attack. And not only did the Ukrainians attack, they in fact invaded and then occupied Kursk, Russia. So why did he get appointed to become minister? Well, probably because people senior in Moscow, working in the military, who engaged in the corruption with him, thought, listen, if we get him promoted as minister, then there won't be any investigation to what he did, which worked fine until now there's drone strikes inside of Russia. And somebody has to be blamed for why there's so many of them. The military blames the intelligence service blames the military, but they're all happy to blame the Minister of Transport. But now if he's going to be fired from the government, he can be investigated again. He can talk. And so undoubtedly the people in the military, the people at the senior level in politics in Russia, had a very clear reason of why they thought they'd be better off without the former minister being able to walk around and talk about what he knew or to give testimony against them. So overall, we see that Ukraine, the attacks that it's carrying out in Russia, have the primary effect of attacking the structures and the ability of Russia to wage war against Ukraine. But there's a secondary consequence. It's creating political pressure in Russia. We see that political pressure mounting. We see how this is damaging the economy of Russia. Ukraine's new strategy is brilliant because now it's taking the war to Russia. And unfortunately, Western countries continue to push Ukraine to do things like not attack the shadow fleet, not attack the oil refineries. However, what it's doing now is effective. We can all hope that it just continues. So looking ahead, pay close attention to the attacks within Russia. They're more than just drone attacks. They're in fact something else. They're a paradigm shift. And they're a paradigm shift that can allow Ukraine to win. It could very well lead to the downfall of the Putin regime. Thank you.